Bonjour, Dieumerci.
Yes, here I am. Sorry for being late.
No
worries. No worries.
We understand things are often kind of in fluctuations. So I'm just going to save the document I was working on, we were doing.
All right. Yes, because I was in countryside and then I lost the network. Now I just arrived in town. That's why I'm late. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
No,
don't
problem.
be sorry for that. It's not a problem.
So we can talk, and then we are kind of recording this, so we can then save it for everyone. Just one. Okay, I think I'm going to put this as this is a new book. What should we call it? The Things That Give Us Joy.
Yeah, go with that.
But I've got another directory with that, so this is going to be book.
Okay, book. Yeah, label it as book then. That's fine.
Things That Give Us
I
Joy.
think. Yeah, label it as book.
And so this is.
So, Dieumerci, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are right. That's one is Dieumerci. Yes.
Okay.
You are pronouncing it in the way.
Okay.
Good.
Your English is very good, because otherwise you would have to test mine and David's French, which can be described as a bit rusty at this stage.
Yes, thank you.
So I think we stick with English, if that's okay with you.
It's okay for me. I can speak. I can listen. Yeah.
Good. Parce qu'il a passé beaucoup de temps que je n'ai plus parlé le français, donc c'est assez difficile pour moi, 7 mois.
Oui, en fait, c'est ça. Moi, je parle le français et l'anglais, mais tous les autres, c'est le français seulement. Donc, c'est difficile pour eux l'anglais. Donc,
je comprends. Est-ce que vous pensez que notre français, c'est assez fort pour faire un dialogue?
Oui, c'est bon. Oui, c'est bon. L'essentiel, c'est juste de capter les messages. Et c'est ça le plus important. Si on peut comprendre, il n'y a pas de souci.
Ah, très bien. Alors, nous n'avons pas de problème avec ça, parce qu'il a passé beaucoup de temps que je ne plus parler le français.
Et là, de la manière dont vous parlez, déjà, c'est bon. La tonalité, peu importe. L'essentiel est de passer le message.
Très bien. Je suis heureux de sentir ça, parce que c'est important. Très important, parce que s'il ne parle pas l'anglais, alors nous chercherons, on essayait de faire le dialogue en français.
Tout à fait.
Tout à fait. Okay. So,
good.
Do we start?
Yeah.
How should we start? We spoke before, Dieumerci. You were on call before with us. And you spoke and you talked about the situation in the Congo. And as you saw in the translation that you kindly translated for us. And can I just ask, Candux Corporation, are you a company?
Yes, Candux Corporation is a company that I've tried to create. It's still on the creation process. So it's a company that aims to create jobs, because we realize that many young people, when they finish their studies, they're just looking for the job. And as we know, there is not a job in Africa. Many people are just seeking for a job instead of creating job. Then we are going to help young people to create job, to have that innovation mindset all over in Africa. So Candux Corporation is a company that has many divisions. We have started with farming, Candux farming, Candux commerce, and Candux design. Others are still long-term projects. Yes.
Okay.
So what do you do to create jobs?
So to create job for me, in Kanduk's design, I have it's a platform that incubates many workers, many designers. So we have many people who have those capacity, who have those knowledge and skills about design. Whenever we find an opportunity, we help them to sign contracts, to look for people who are looking for designs like flyers and so on, and then we give them the job. So they are going to work on the project, the contract, and we will get 30%, and the person will get 70%. When we talk about agriculture, we are involving many young to invest in agriculture. First of all, we started with saving during a certain period, and then we invested in mostly in vegetables. And we are planting crops, and then after that, we are going to sell them. So instead of people being in jobless, they are going to try to do agriculture, and it will help them to to get something. Actually, we are doing also farming. We are doing rabbits. We are raising rabbits, and we have started, and we are doing great job. We have actually 15 gallon of urine, and also we are selling it as fertilizer. And
I see.
also,
Okay.
yes. And about commerce, we are doing we are trying to help other people to sell and to buy. So it's a kind of business. When we create our awareness, we do advertisement for other companies and so on.
Okay, I ask because I'm obviously interested. So how does that work for your own economics? How does that translate to, how does Candace in these things as you help other people along? So when you do the design and you help introduce them, how does that work through for yourself, or when people plant and those sort of things with the agriculture or and that aspect?
So the way people are going to work, it's a kind of like partnership. So I get partners. We are working as partners, and they have shares. And whenever we get anything like a profit or return earning, we are going to share according to the shares that everyone has in the company.
Okay. So we actually, it's probably good to talk a little bit along those lines instead. I'll go back into the reason, into a broader reason, if I may. Our interest, our motivation started from us as investment managers, and we spent a few years looking into the problems of sustainability and the problems of investments in that way. I think we looked too deep is our problem. So we looked at all the opportunities of investments, and then we looked further into the problems we were trying to solve, and we ended up looking deeper and deeper, and we realized that investments won't solve them. Investments will give you opportunities to make lots of money, people along the way, but very much sort of in some ways the problem with it is ultimately we live in a world where money is made through an extractive economics in that sense. And we'll come back to what you're doing and what we want to do as well, because it ties very, very strongly along with it. Rightly or wrongly, whether we were right or wrong in that, we realized that if we wanted to really help coming out of the sustainability problem, we can't really do it from being inside an investment fund, because it won't let us say things in the way that we want to say. And we spent a year trying to understand what we're doing. We wrote a book called The Unsustainable Truth. And that kind of expressed what we felt about how investments ultimately traps everything into the same problem, and is not going to let us escape it. And then I think we got seriously concerned about climate change after. And we got seriously concerned about climate change because we were giving a talk to a faith group about climate change on the IPCC report, which came out last August, last year, no, year before, right?
Came out
year before.
autumn 21, yeah.
Autumn 21.
Yeah.
And when we looked at that combined with the skills that we had from our investments, we realized actually that we're not going to have a nice time at all. So we started asking, how can we deal with the source of the problem, which is our use of oil, of gas, and of coal. And we, from our background, we recognize that there's no point protesting or petitioning about these things because it's the owners who decide. And if we really want to do something about it, we need to change the ownership. And that's led us into the proposals that we have about the ownership. As we move further from there, we realize that the only sensible way to change the ownership is to have everybody own it. Yourself, your friends, and everyone be effectively the owners. And we are owners with one voice. And the ownership has to be without any motivation for the money that they make, because as soon as we are motivated by the money that they make, our intent to protect the planet and people is going to change. It's going to start going to what can we do with the money instead. So the simplest way to do that is buy out the companies so that we own them. As you say, we become basically shareholders. There should be a better form than this. We become transformational owners rather than shareholders, is what we call it. And it's transformational in that we're not owning it at all for the money. We're owning it for the responsibility to protect the planet and its people. And the first step we do when we do that is we take all the profits and we give it to everybody in the world. Simply write everyone a check. When we do that, we strip away the financial motivation. Everybody then sees very transparently that this is everybody can come together. And we can then put the production of oil, gas, and coal onto a roadmap where we will start cutting them down. And the path, as we were talking to a head of a major energy company, was talking about how coal produces twice the emission as gas. So if you reduced coal by 10% and you increase gas by 15%, you still be producing less emissions, the amount we need, and have the energy we need to continue. And we can carry on with that sort of process along the way, helping us to make that transition. Of course, the reality is that we use so much energy at the moment from oil, gas, and coal that this will not happen easily without people giving some things up. And that led us to the things that give us joy. What are the things that we really want to protect, that we really want to keep? And for many people, having livelihoods is the starting point of that. You need the jobs. You need to be able to have a livelihood, to be able to make money, to be able to do that. And if we actually want to bring transformational ownership about, which is really getting people from all over the world to give their consent to buying out all of the oil, gas, and coal companies and then cutting their production, we need that consent to be a voluntary and honest consent, which means we need to help people with their livelihoods. And that comes down to our approach, and what we think of is that we actually think of doing this not by a campaign to say, vote for my campaign, but actually a campaign where we ask people, how can we help people with their livelihoods? How can they still be able to have livelihoods as we see climate change affecting them? And incidentally, climate change to Richard and I is much more than simply the physical effects of climate change. And the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is classic, is very important in that way. Because climate change is driving this stampede for people to try and take everything out of the land in the Democratic Republic of Congo because it happens to have lots of resources. And that is a part of climate change. And so the problems associated with it is part of our climate change story, is part of our problem. And the aspect of us being able to say, we need to cut our oil, gas, and coal has also to address the livelihoods of the people there, and has to use those livelihoods, the stories of us being able to build livelihoods, to go back to the world that is wanting all these resources and says, look in the mirror. You are responsible. And your actions have consequences that you are trying to hide away from. And to bring all that into a new dialogue. And it becomes transformational in calling for new governance, new way of actually owning oil, gas, and coal, in that it propagates on to transform all the other aspects we think about our world in that way. Now, some people we talk to very often take the stance of saying, well, that's such a big thing, surely it won't happen and it's too difficult. And to that, we point to two things. The first thing is that we don't need to persuade people because climate change itself is going to persuade people. In the United Kingdom at the moment, there are no vegetables in the supermarkets because there has not been enough water. And there has not been enough water, not only in this country, but also in the countries we normally buy our vegetables from. So it's persuading people already. So it's coming along that side. And the other part of this is that when you have this as a positive story, when we are able to, when the world ends up using so much oil, gas, and coal as we do at the moment, everything that we do actually continues to make climate change worse. And we have to choose what it is that we do very carefully so that we are not wasting the energy that we have. We're not actually making climate change worse for no good reason. And for Richard and I, that means that rather than a campaign that only is useful if it works, we want to do it in a way that each step of it is beneficial to someone. And we want that to be a message for everybody around, that every step of what they do needs to help somehow in the things that either give them joy or their neighbors joy and so on. And when we go around and actually seeking that and ask those questions and talk to people, inevitably it comes back down to things that help with our relationships with each other, things that help us to come together as communities. And so that is the reason why we want to go about it in this way. So coming back to your comment about the jobs and everything, I think that's really important. We have been working with a group in Kenya, in Mathare, with a guy called Morris. He's a musician. And we've basically gone through it by developing an idea that we call emergent economics, which is actually that we can create the economics ourselves. We can find resources around us. And it doesn't start from money, it starts from recognizing the opportunities and the needs. And Mathare in that community is one where they have very few jobs, but they end up creating an oil press that they are using for different things. And they are building out skills as much as you're describing. And that fits within an idea we have. I think I'm speaking almost too much. Should I stop here or should I carry on?
No, carry on and explain it. Definitely.
No.
I think that's important.
Dieumerci, is that okay, or do you want us?
No, it's okay. You can expand. I think it's more important.
Okay.
And you have any questions, then you butt in and ask them. Okay.
So we have this idea called a lab on every farm. For us, a farm is not necessarily just the agricultural farm. It's anywhere where we have resources and where we can build livelihoods. That's what for us a farm is. So it can be in the middle of a city, it can be in a rural area, it can be somewhere in between. It could be inside a community center, it could be in a school, or it could be in a household, it could be anything. And a lab is essentially a place where we try things to build confidence that we can actually create livelihoods. And that's basically the essence of the lab. And the distinction between normally just trying things is within a lab, we have the support and we have some idea where we actually monitor and we try to find out, we learn as well. We learn about it and we develop more skills and we do this. So with the community in Matare, they came along and we started talking. And a few weeks back, probably about 6 weeks back now, maybe a little bit more, Morris, who's the young person there that we were in touch with, and another story how we got in touch, came and said a woman came from there and there are farms around the way and the farmers have grown avocado and a lot of the avocado falls from the trees and they're left on the ground because they don't fit the profile that's needed. And he asked about, you know, can we help fund them to buy a big oil press to do this? And we said no. But we showed them some picture of a oil press, of a manual oil press. And I says, actually, that's all you need. You don't need the very expensive stuff. The reason for this is very important. We see that if you have a community that relies on buying some equipment along in order to be able to progress along, when that breaks down, they're usually completely collapsed. It doesn't help them. The technology that they use has to be commensurate with the technology that they can themselves manage and fix. Because otherwise what happens is you simply create that investment trap that we talk about. You end up needing more money to be able to make more money that for community that start off having difficulties along, whether it's in the United Kingdom or whether it's in Kenya, they ultimately traps them. Is very hard to escape. So we said, look, that doesn't make sense for us, for you to try that, but here's a picture of what it is. He took it back, showed it to some of the people in the community. A couple of weeks later, he came out and showed us a picture and said they made one. And we thought, fantastic. This is just what we want to see. And I'm telling this wrong because when I tell this sounds like somehow we know better, but it's not. The thing is, they came forward and they had an idea, we just bounced it back to them, back and forth. And from there, they've gone from being ambitious in thinking maybe we can now produce vegetable oil for East Africa to recognizing actually, you know, they can't produce that much, but maybe they can produce lip balm because they realize that there are bee farmers nearby and they can work together with them. And in doing so, they've now got a situation where they've got youths working together. They've got the community coming all together and thinking about how they manage the governance, what they do with the sharing. And within this, we help them along with some funds, like being able to pay for government registration license, to be able to do some things of that kind, which are essential in terms of money, because we do live in a world that's dominated by money, and some straddles, some hurdles are inevitable along in that way. And we're helping them along. I think we're beginning to see whether we can help them along with understanding how to do kind of business bookkeeping and that kind of stuff along. But they really have a lot of talent and is being brought up and is being shown out in all of this. So that's the lab. There is a agreement we want to reach with them, which is that of all the money that they make as gross profits, a quarter of it goes back into the lab. That means that the lab, which is for them, is able to continue with other projects and other things. So they develop their resources back into it so that it can continue on. And a quarter of that, we're asking them to put into what we call an umbrella for unscalable things. So I see all of these things as essentially things which do not need to scale for people to be able to have a livelihood. So you don't actually need to create somehow a business app that somehow needs 1 million people to be able to own it before you make money. And those are sort of unscalable things. And when I look at how our natural world works, I see our natural world as being like that. And so that money that goes into the umbrella for unscalable things allows other labs to start. And it goes along in that way. That's the model that we have. And I wanted to tell you that because I think what you're doing very much fits within that sort of shape as well. And where we would like to engage with students and young people in Democratic Republic of Congo is to look and say, how can we see opportunities together? How can we help you see resources and opportunities? How can we help you to create enterprise that will allow you to have ways by which you can have jobs and so on? without necessarily dependent in the same way of the economy in the way that we often are. So when you talk of, you know, the farming you do and the vegetation and those sort of things, they're all very much part of it. And within this community of Matare, where we are seeing now is they have an aspect which is industry, together with the lip balm and the oil press and so on. And incidentally, one of the other groups we have been on, when we showed a picture of the oil press, one of the people said, can we buy one? So there's potential in something there too. Although I'm not sure whether that's entirely feasible for them to produce in that sense. And then there's another part of it, which is that they also grow some food. They need to balance that between cash crops to sell to bring in money and potentially food for themselves, especially when things have been run into droughts and situations. So there's aspect of that agriculture, and I don't want to use the regenerative agriculture. I guess emergent is the term I like, emergent agriculture in a sense, rather than regenerative. And then there is also an aspect that comes through is that I think they have kind of like an IT aspect. And as I said, the young man we're in contact with, he's a musician. So there's clearly an arts and culture aspect along with that. And now as we go on through, there's sort of the bookkeeping side. And then with all of those, I think it comes a case of saying, how can we allow all of those skills, much like the way you describe, to become opportunities that can extend further, help them interact. And then we can try to connect all of these up together. Our ultimate aim is to put a lid on climate change. Our ultimate aim is to have all of these people say, we support taking over the oil, gas, and coal production companies, passing on that ownership, essentially massively democratizing it between everybody in the world, stripping out the money by writing a check to everybody, literally. And that's actually a lot of money that's available. That's like 150 billion, $160 billion this year, probably.
Yeah, to that, you possibly a bit more even, but yeah, it's significant amount of money and a lot more than it was the year before when it was about 110.
Yeah, so, 8 billion people in the world. So that's quite meaningful. And then to take that and start saying, okay, get all the talents who work for these companies together and start working out the roadmap on how we actually reduce the emissions by reducing the production of the oil, gas, and coal. And you need to do that. You cannot do that as separate companies, because if Richard owns a coal company and I own a gas company, and I'm saying to Richard, you should cut, he's looking at me and says, why don't you cut? And the result of that is actually he's going to say, unless you pay me for it, I'm not going to do it. So we end up being held ransom by the owners of these companies. And that's why we have all the people outside the boardrooms, placards protesting, and they never go anywhere because they're waiting for a payout, basically. And in the meantime, we do need the energy. So it's not wrong for them to say, look, we need to keep providing the energy. So it doesn't allow us to actually put on the governance we need. So that's where we are. And what we want to do, what we've been talking with Kaka, is about how we can help the student network, the EACCGN, when they go to Kisarian and other things, to think about, what's the economics there? How can you realize it in terms of economics? And that's very important for us because we see, perversely, Africa as the place that will teach the rest of the world how to live through climate change. I think the rest of the world, the richer people, think that Africa is the place where everybody will try to escape from as climate change hits. They talk about sub-Saharan Africa and how bad that will be and all those things. But we actually think the rich world has no clue what's going to hit them. And I'll give you a story of what I mean by this. Last year, a friend of mine in Germany, his mother was living in this big house, very wealthy, and really kind of very advanced house with all sorts of gadgets and everything. And because of it being particularly hot and particularly dry, everybody needed more energy and they couldn't provide it. They had a power cut. the house has everything electronically controlled, so she couldn't leave the house because she couldn't open the doors anymore. So that's the world that the rich world is facing. Everything is dependent on everything else working perfectly, and things are not going to work perfectly as we go forward. And that's where I think the efforts that you make and the things that we can do there, and you can do there, becomes positive stories of how actually we can face climate change. And we can take those stories around the world when people are facing it for the first time and actually say, you know, we can come together. And we can share the way in which we can still find livelihoods and still find things that give us joy. So that's kind of where we come from. And ultimately, the whole point is do this quickly. We want to reach out. We want to start telling people about transformational ownership so that we don't allow the COP conferences just to carry on the way they do. We give young people the knowledge that they can have control and the knowledge that the world is better with them in it, so that they can actually use their efforts for the things that give them joy and for the things that give other people joy. So that's kind of how we want to bring this around in it. So definitely ambitious in some sense, but we feel it's very, very much grounded. You want to add anything, Richard?
No, I think you summed it up very well. We're big believers in what David describing as a new way of thinking about economics. And we are not going to be able to face and tackle climate change unless we can build economics around it, because people actually need livelihoods. If you can't feed your family, you're going to chop down the last tree on the planet to get that food. So the two of them go very much hand in hand in terms of how we think about climate change versus the economy. And they're inseparable in many ways. Do you have any questions, Dieumerci?
I've been following the points that you were raising. They are very, very important, and I like very well about the things that bring us joy, and the way you were tackling about the climate change and the way you are doing this great impact in the world, and the way you say that we also, all the world is involved and everyone should take their responsibilities. I'm very, very interesting, and that one, even though I didn't mention it, but it's along the way we are trying to see how we can plant like trees. And I don't know if I mentioned it last time when we were in the previous webinar, because we have plots, and I was mobilizing these people, young students who are in that group, how we can make impacts in DRC, like sensibilize and educate people about the planting of trees. And this is along our project. We need to start with the planting of 500 trees. And everyone is very, very interested about that. And they are willing to involve themselves and in order to accomplish that task. I have only a question I would like to ask, because on the second point that you were tackling of, when you say about the resources, you would like to educate people how to manage their resources. First of all, recognize what the opportunity that you have, and how we can control those opportunities. This is a very challenge that we are facing in DRC, because and even in Africa, because we don't even know the value of the resource that we have, and we don't know the output, the outcome of those resources. Why am I saying that? It means that if our resources are not going outside abroad, if they were not exploited by people coming abroad, we won't know even the users. We won't know even the value, because if they ask us to use ourselves those resources, we won't do anything with that because of our education system. We don't focus most on industrialization, and many people are not even aware about the value that has the resources. So how are you going to change that mindset that is already existed, so that we can start by the education system, trying to focus more on the importance of the resources that we have, so that people can be aware and learn more about the industrialization. Because we can see that in other countries like China and other developed countries, the way they did, they have been sending their best students in USA, for example, US and other developed countries, to learn about some specific field. And then after that, they make a contract, they will return and come back in their country in order to implement the things that they've learned. The way they have been learning, they will do internship after the studies, and after the internship to go back in the country. But if we analyze very well in DRC, when those people who are talented, who have good GPA, when they finish their higher school, and even though they had got a higher percentage, but the government doesn't support them. They don't give them they don't give them that opportunity to go outside and they study, so that they can come back and develop the country. How can you change that mindset? This is the question.
I think that there are clearly lots of different parts to what you're describing. So there is the basic aspect of the difference between the view that people in the Democratic Republic of Congo have over their own, the wealth of their own land, and the view that people from outside, especially from the industrial part outside, view those resources along. And that, I think, is kind of a starting point along there. Along the way, what you describe is the aspect of how does the Democratic Republic of Congo, how is it going to best progress from where it is? And that's a problem that's tied up with how we think industrialization will come in a new age of industrialization. Industrialization has all been reliant on very available energy. And 82.3% of our energy, that's the number in 2021, the number for 2022 is not yet complete, came from a combination of oil, of gas, and coal. If we are going to tackle the climate problem, and if we're going to say, how do we reduce that? We're going to find that we cannot just simply rely on using that alone. And for the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, what we also think is rich people are never going to give their money up. So that's, many people who say, oh, that shouldn't be the case and all the rest of it, but I think that's just how it is. You have to start from the side of saying, okay, fine, you know what, you're going to hang on to your money, you're not going to give your money up. So how do we find our own way to progress along with it? So that says you want to think about the industry and the kind of way of progressing as what's naturally emergent from the country itself, from where it is. What are the sources of energy? What are the sources of approach that can be taken in that way? And that's going to become even more relevant because as climate change progresses, Richard and I had this conversation earlier today, is the world going to get richer or is it going to get poorer? And I'm on the side of thinking we're going to get poorer. Richard is sort of thinking maybe we won't in that way. And if the whole world effectively gets poorer, the poorest parts are going to find that they have to find their own way to see how to thrive. And that's a very important aspect of it. So that doesn't mean selling your country out to someone else for pennies. What it does say is to have the people who want to buy that to recognize they have a responsibility over. That then says the education is not just education within the DRC itself, but also in Europe, in America, in the well-developed parts of Asia, and in Australia and places of that kind. And that part of that conversation requires the people from the DRC to speak up. And that's where we want to, we feel we need to do. Now, how do we actually do that? I think we need to do this through success stories. I think we need to do stories that actually say, we are here, we are a community, we want you to recognize and to come together, because that's how we're going to face our climate change. But part of your coming together, you need to realize and recognize that you cannot treat our resources as, kind of that freely available in that way. And part of that dialogue may then say, if your government won't fund those kind of students with high GPAs, actually when people go along and buy a Tesla or use wind turbine energy and so on, they need to contribute back in some of those forms. So those are programs that actually you may then create and come about. But some of that may come from what other people there may think, oh, we can do that, or other forms. So that form of interaction is where we think it needs to come from. And those interactions have an economics associated with them. Goodwill is important. Faith is very important. And that sense of us doing the right thing. But ultimately, if there isn't that element of economics around, then eventually it can't last, because someone somewhere is going to find they got to make a living somehow, and they got to hop off and do something else instead. So finding those economic touch points and understanding how to construct those economics in a way that's no longer extractive, that's not extractive, but actually helps and strengthen back. I think that's the important part. But along the way, everybody's expectations need to change a bit. We live under a very tight constraint in the world today, in the way that I see. I think that the prices of everything going around, countries in East Africa are seeing 20-odd% inflation, 20-30% inflation. Those sort of things are consequences of the very tight constraint that climate change is putting on us. When there's no water, we lose energy. We lose energy, price of everything goes up. We can't have food. And so it's a long process, or it's a gradual process. And what we would love to do is to be able to start it. What we'd love to be able to do is to start doing things that can actually create stories along, and we can go. Another question about 500 trees, because what I'd like to think of is, can we make planting 500 trees into benefits for 50, 100 communities, by thinking about how we go about planting it. So it's not just putting a tree into the ground, because a tree is kind of, is a source of life. It provides shelter, it can provide fruits, it can provide flowers, it can provide all sorts of things along. And it should be a way by which we can think about what actual economics can come from that planting of the tree itself. And that, it can become a place where you can run a cafe next to it, as a story with it and all the rest. And it's the stories that are important in the world that we are facing. These are stories. These are kind of like the stories that, these will become the fairy tales of the future. The moral tales and the stories of great challenges that we hear about that become like our legends of of the past. What we're doing today will be the legends of the future.
Yes, yes, I got it was you were clear by explaining, and this is very enough, and I'm satisfied about that. But there is still some question that I can that there are still struggle. I'm still struggle according to economic, and when we are talking about planting trees. Yes, because even though we are trying to do so, but we know that the outcome of that, it won't be easy, because there are just people who are still there for looking for the transforming the trees in embers, transforming the trees in embers, because you know that actually we still have issues with electricity, and it's not everyone who can prepare or cook with electricity. So we are still using embers, and many people would like even to steal the trees in order to transform them in ember, and that is still a problem. And also I told you last time about the problem of security is still there. It's still there. Those people they are still cutting trees and try to sort out them, try to sell them. And some other big trees, they are being sold in Uganda. And also, I would like to ask about the problem of economy, the value of our national currency. How would you like to have a good economy while our value of the money doesn't care? Like actually in Kenya, they don't have forex. Like in almost all the country of ESA, we see Rwanda and we see Tanzania is performing well actually, because they said in the previous meeting that they still have forex for the next coming 4 months. But when it comes to DRC, the value of dollars is increasing day by day. Actually, $1 is at 2,000 and 300. And how are we going to overcome that? Is by production. We need to produce a lot, and in order to make exportation, but we can't produce while we are still in war. And those countryside who are producing, can produce when there is war, everyone is afraid to go and make companies. It discourages even outside investors. No one would like to invest in the country because it is not secure. No one would like to put his money somewhere where there is not secure. So how are you going to overcome that one? The peace is still needed in order to overcome even the economical issues. And we like also to get, how can we get a training about climate change, and so that people who have been involved in this program can be able and to advertise about the problem and to make impact in the society. When you are talking about we can do climate change by reducing the gas and the oil, and also cars, because I heard from the previous meeting you say that you may advocate that people start using public transportation instead of individual transportation, so that it may reduce the effect of climate change. So how can you do that? How can you make a training so that everyone who is involved in the program is able to advocate? We can do it by broadcast, you can do it by social media or online, even television and so forth. Thank you for the response.
Okay, so I'm going to answer those in different ways. I think the first thing I'd like to say is many of these things, I think they would come, we ourselves need to learn too, and what we want to do is to be practical and actually be as you were talking about partners together in that sense, we want to be able to be together in thinking about these things and all the rest and so on. So some parts of it, so if you take, for example, the situation with the currency, that's a government situation, but as far as the community is concerned, the way that they can deal with that, the only way they can deal with that in some ways is how can they actually access an external market? How can they actually access money from outside for what they can provide? And that opens up all sorts of questions about, well, what can you do? What can you produce out of resources you have, which can do that? And one of the things which I think is being misunderstood is not being sufficiently appreciated. It's just the telling of the story itself is a resource. It's the lessons and the telling of the stories and the way in which you face challenges and do that. They are things that other people can learn from. So very often we miss that. And that's an angle which I think we can talk a little bit more about, and we can see whether there may be something that along the way that helps little communities along. It's not going to transform the government. It's not going to transform the whole monetary policy within the Democratic Republic of Congo, but as far as a community or different communities around is concerned, it may help them along in that sense, and it brings the awareness into it, and that's the important part. Towards the other part that you pointed to before about, how do we actually get the awareness and the education from within the country and from outside the country to converge together. So that's a part in that way. So I think that student communities can do this very well. Now I'm going to show you a video I just looked up and I've been thinking about, I think it's possible to do, and it tackles this question of energy. And what this is a solar steam engine. And I think that people can make solar steam engines in where you are. And we tend to ignore steam engines because we think those are things of the past, but you have a steam engine, you can generate electricity. If you have a solar power, direct sun power, you can cook, you can do all sorts of things with it. And I don't know whether this worked, but I reckon that a little bit of thought, a little bit of technology, and a little bit of playing around, you could end up doing this. And if you end up doing this, what you have is the ability to provide locally sources of power that people can generate out of what is naturally there, the sun, and help communities along with, so that they start looking at trees in a different way, so that they don't start looking at trees as wood to burn.
Hello everyone, today I'd like to show you my parabolic mirror solar tracker steam generator setup. As I've shown in an earlier video, I polished this satellite dish into a parabolic mirror. I used the mirror to heat up this block of aluminum to generate steam. I mounted this contraption to my solar tracker, but the problem was that the disc and the aluminum block together were so heavy that it created a huge momentum which was too much for the solar tracker to handle. So then I changed it into this. With this design, the center of mass is precisely approximately more or less exactly at the point of rotation, which makes it a much more balanced system and therefore much easier to be moved by the servos.
So I'm going to move it forward. I haven't seen So I'm going to escape this because there's no need to necessarily follow everything along. But the point there, and the part I see, is that there are lots of different ways, I think, with basics, very simple kind of engineering that anyone mechanical and so on might be able to do, combined with a little bit of kind of understanding of the kind of science and engineering that students would have. You can provide sources of energy. And, if you can boil the water, you can provide steam. For a steam engine, you need, about 200 degrees, which you can easily get when you have a lot of sun. Instead of an aluminum block, you could probably use stones. It'll probably work just as well. And those sort of things. And you can use lenses, and actually you can create pyrolysis, which is a way to turn waste into biochar as another source of energy, and those kind of things there. So there are lots of potentials that actually not just allows people to do jobs for other people, but to create whole industries in its own right in that way. And I think that those are approaches that makes a lot of sense for the description that you have, because it allows people to start being able to build livelihoods, and it creates stories that can reach out to the people who uses the resources that are made from the Congo, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and actually be aware that they have a responsibility over it. So that's kind of how I think that dialogue goes through. And as we go along through, those stories and that kind of things can become teaching materials, they can become materials to interact, they can become a source of income in their way to reach into kind of the dollar economies, as opposed to the devaluation economies. I think all the countries in East Africa are on this path of devaluation. The Democratic Republic of Congo has these two massive losses in terms of currency devaluations over the past 10 years. The last one being just over COVID, right? And then it's on this sort of steady trend. When we talk to Kenya and people in Kenya, they're on this sort of steady trend. And you really want to be able to say, if you're developing a community, there is in some way a source of a small income that comes in dollar terms that compensates you for the loss of the deflation you face, of the inflation you face, the devaluation you face, not deflation, devaluation. If I'm going to lose 10% of my currency because of my government's policy, I want to be able to somehow generate 10% of my income in dollars. That's kind of how you end up protecting yourself.
Okay. It's very, very important and very clear the way you are responding to it. Very happy and satisfied to listen from you.
Yeah. So what we want to do, and we've taken a good amount of your time, and is to know how we can engage, and even the simple things about planting tree. When we go into the details, they matter. So your comment about understanding that outside is how do you plant it with the community, so that maybe even not even plant 500, but start with 3 kind of thing. But how does that join on together so that the community you plant with sees the value of it? And the way to do that may well be, as we were talking about, we need to tackle them and help them think, how can they have energy? How can they think of what they can use to cook food and that sort of thing, and not cut it down, because we need to tackle those things first. And when they can see that people are working with them and they're part of community working together with that, then they would probably end up protecting your trees. And be a part of that. And the other side of it is, plant the trees that provide them with the medicine or the fruits that they need. And that becomes kind of an incentive to it. And that's a way, that's a better way forward. But as Richard said, if you're stuck and the only thing you can do is cut the last tree down, you're going to cut the last tree down.
You will. That's the way economics work, and that's the way our psychology works, and that's not going to change. So if we want to fight climate change and what it's doing to us, it must include some form of economics, because otherwise it's just not going to work.
Yes, you're right. I think that the planting actually is not an issue because first of all, even though they plant somewhere that you have been planting trees, it doesn't stop there. It will it will be reproducing again and again. And also I'm thinking about that idea of planting trees that won't be stolen, like when we are planting trees that are related to medical issues, the trees that you can use the leaves to help to produce some medical. It can be also important one, because it will not allow you to cut the trees, and you will be using that the leaves. For example, I know some trees that possess white leaves, and those leaves they are used for medical cure. They can use them to solve some medical issue. I think that can be one of the idea. And you ask about the how we can like implement those action, even those small, and be able to plant the trees. I think it will be by mobilizing those young people and work together. Let everyone bring a small contribution, a small action, and we speak up along the country. And because I've already have some lands, some empty lands where I can plant trees in the village, and we can like organize ourselves and go there, buy trees and everything, and we start planting by taking pictures that we can post and share everywhere, where people can see and observe what is being done in the country. This, I think, it will be one way of advertising and advocating about climate change, according to me.
Yeah. So you know, you mentioned land and you plant trees. There's part of this is actually, as soon as you plant it, you change the nature of the land. It's no longer an empty piece of land or land with some things. It becomes like that. And then you can ask the question, actually, you know, trees, people, majestic trees, people are centers of community. So that's another angle towards it. Or in places which are really kind of, you know, has too much sun along, they provide shade, and that shade can allow other commerce, other activities to happen. So thinking in those ways goes into this aspect of kind of how a community sees the space and how the trees can help to highlight it. And if you do that, then the trees have more function than simply being planted, and people don't actually understand. And so that education around that kind of, I think, you know, some people call it sensitization. I want to think of it as kind of awareness that there are opportunities that are created by simple actions that we can take. And we really want to be part of kind of being able to help bring that about, think of how that can be part of kind of the thinking, and be part of the or helping the dialogue. What we found really with Morris's situation, which is in Matare, as we were saying, and I need to prepare something for that for Monday to talk to a faith group. So if I manage it, when I manage it, I'll show it to you as well. What we really found is that they themselves have expressed they are amazed at what they have done, but principally it was because everybody was part of it, and no one was kind of responsible for the failure or taking credit for his success, because it was everybody's failure and everybody's success. And when you can bring community to start thinking of it for them in terms of everybody being part of it in that way, that's when they start seeing opportunities that they're able to do for themselves. And that's what we've found with our experience at Matare. And I think a lot of what you describe echoes those. When you take a situation like the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is this need really very much to connect with the world outside as well. Those become stories actually that can help you connect, and that can help you in, for example, in when you start talking about the employment opportunities. In today's world, a lot of those sort of design opportunities can connect outside the world. They don't have to be necessarily restricted to businesses within the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you're going to design a flyer, you could design a flyer anywhere along. What makes them choose you is the story of your community, not because of your design. And that's the aspect which actually allows that economics to break through the devaluation that you see in that way. So I think that those are kind of things that are worth considering along, and then seeing how they might be able to be brought together. So how would you like to take this forward?
Okay, yes, I get it, and I get it, you're right. Yeah, we need to take these steps the way you are describing them. They are very strategically described, and I think we are going to follow them. And also, we would like to have one. Do you have one of the document that explain at least everything clearly about the what you do, and why we can adapt it, adapt the project, adapt the way of doing things in our system. It can be also helpful. And I think also time is getting issue now.
What is the easiest way to make money online using your knowledge in 2023? Is it course creation?
Sorry, apologies about that. I think a tab on my browser suddenly popped into life. I think a cookie found its way into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I think that the best thing is, we want to keep engaging. We want to be able to find specific ways in which we can help. So I'm going to, if we stop here, I'm going to sort of make the recording, because we've been recording this. If this is okay, we'll make it available to you. You can then share, or we generally put it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
We chop off some of the bits that might, like that last bit with the YouTube coming alive.
All right. Thank you very much. It will be better. Yes, those recording we can refer anytime to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's pause it here, and then we'll get another time. We'll talk again on. We'll see what we can do and what the steps are.
Indeed.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.
Oui. Bon week-end. Merci beaucoup. À tout à l'heure.
Merci beaucoup. Vraiment merci. À vous autant.
Okay.
Merci.
Bye.